So welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged, and we're back on the grassy plain for a 1v1 here, and this one was sent to me by Kuro-Guro-chan, who is one of the lead developers of the mod, who I'm sure you know that by now. And this is going to be an Elven Civil War battle, so Rules is going to be playing as Imladris, and Rules is one of the better players on the Discord, and Kuro is going to be playing as the Realm of Lothlorien, and both of these factions haven't seen them a great deal ever since 0.96 release. For Imladris, that's mainly because I think they're undergoing a few changes which are going to be in the upcoming hotfix to sort of bring them into line with everyone else a little bit more. And Lothlorien are definitely an acquired taste of a faction, so we'll go through Lothlorien first of all. And they are, I suppose, in a way, the happy middle ground between all of the Elven factions, because they can do everything that all of the other Elven factions can do, but they can't do it quite as well. So, for example, in terms of an ambush, Mirkwood are going to be superior. In terms of just an outright armoured infantry fight, then Imladris are going to be superior. But still, this versatility can serve them quite well, but they are still one of the more difficult factions to play in the game at the moment, in my opinion. They're certainly not to my taste. I'm not good enough to play and win with them in a 1v1 situation anyway. At the front here we've got some Ethel Tirith. They used to be body piercing in 0.95, but that has been changed. They are now just a lower tier archer unit. Difficult to get the most out of, I have noticed, simply because they can be shot up so easily. They do have the Elven accuracy and higher damage values than other basic archers though. So if they can sort of avoid being mowed down in an early skirmish fight, then they can do pretty well for themselves. But against other elves, to be honest with you, the cost efficiency discrepancy shouldn't be too bad, in all honesty. Moving on to the strongest of all of Lothlorien's footbound archers, we have the Galathran Nobles, 78 men in the unit, multiple HP. Very, very strong. They also make very good infantry when they're out of ammunition as well, of course, with their grossly incandescent gold armour. And they will do very well in a skirmish fight just because of their 2 HP. It means they won't be able to be mowed down quite so easily at range like some of the other Elven archers can fall victim to. So they're going to make up the centre of Kuro's skirmish line over here. Be interesting to see how they get on against other elves, however, because neither of them are going to have an accuracy bonus here, well, an accuracy advantage here. Another unit of Ethel Tirith here on this side, and then we move back into his infantry. Spread his formation very wide, which is understandable in an elf versus elf situation. Even when you're playing as the elves against anyone else, you need to spread wide just to sort of prevent yourself from being flanked, which means your lines do tend to be quite thin. Here we have some Lothlorien blades, very, very good infantry this. They are significantly stronger than most of the other basic units, well, line units from other factions that you will see. If you think of the other Elven faction, the Hiri Orth from Mirkwood are a pretty good equivalent to the Lothlorien blades. And yeah, obviously you do pay quite a lot for Elven units like this, but the Lothlorien blades will still be able to, in most situations, trade more effectively. And a one-to-one situation, Lothlorien blades should be able to beat most other line infantry. But of course, against other elves, that's not necessarily the case. And in fact, Imladris tend to do better in an infantry fight. But we shall see how well these guys can do against something like the Imladris Guardians. Here in the middle, we have, I think, one of... No, actually, no, this isn't the most expensive, but it is the Galathran Riders, which are possibly still the strongest horse archer unit in the game in terms of a single unit. They're multiple HP horse archers. Elven bonuses are also applied to them, so they still have that accuracy that most others will have. Unlike they don't have body piercing like the Ranger Cavalry, but unlike them, they won't fall away under the slightest bit of arrow fire. And it'll be interesting to see actually which is the strongest of all the horse archers. But I think the Galathran Riders would take that home. I think the Chieftain's Vanguard are a little bit more focused around keeping themselves alive rather than dishing out the damage in quite the same way the Galathran Riders can do. Is this the General's Bodyguard? It is. There's Haldir, so he's going to be riding with them. And of course they make pretty decent melee cavalry when all is said and done as well because of their Elven skill and their 2 hit points. Not fantastic off the charge, of course, like most horse archers. Out here, we'll actually go to the flanks first of all before we start going along the line. Because out here on the flanks, we've got some Sindar Blade Masters. Now the Sindar Blade Masters, the main difference between them and the Lothlorien Sword Masters, which are the other sort of two-handed sword unit you can pick as Lothlorien. The Sindar Blade Masters, I believe they're still 100 florins cheaper, and they can hide anywhere, which might not seem like it makes any sense, but then you also have to factor in the account that they have significantly less armour, so they can be shot up pretty easily. But other than that, they do make up one of the stronger ambush units in the game at the moment, provided they go unseen. But of course on the grassy plain that's a little bit harder to do because the battlefield is in such full view. Going back here into the middle, nearly skipped over them, but we have the Maethir Las Gelen, which are of course the quintessential Elven Javelin unit that Mirkwood and Lothlorien have available to them. Obviously, no one can hold a candle to Linden in terms of Elven Javelins, but the Lasgellen are still going to be a very good tool, particularly for zoning out cavalry, because they also double as spears in melee, and indeed against some of the heavier cavalry in the game, this might be one of your only options to use. They are pretty expensive as well, so in certain situations this is almost a mandatory unit to bring, but they are pretty good as well. Here in the middle, we have some Lothlorien warriors, so who are a two-handed axe unit, of course, that means they are AP. They aren't as skillful as the sword variant, but having some AP, particularly against Imladris, is a pretty good call. Here in the middle we have some Sylvan Staff Masters who are actually facing the wrong way, but that's because they deployed stakes at the back to prevent the Imladris cavalry from cycling around behind them quite so easily. And the Staff Masters are one of the cheaper units in the Lothlorien roster, and essentially they have extremely high melee defense but very low attack, so they are essentially just a melee tar pit that will hold an enemy unit in place for a long time without dying quite so easily, unless they're under arrow fire, in which case they will die very quickly. So he's got a lot of these axemen, and then on the sides it looks like it's the same, but he does have a unit of the Lothlorien Mounted Company. Now in the upcoming hotfix, which I think is coming tomorrow at the time of recording, Friday that will be, and the Lothlorien Mounted Company are very good lancers, and with the Elven skill they can also hold their own in melee, and there will be 3 of them available to Lothlorien after the hotfix. So that's very good, because Lothlorien, they are a little bit light in terms of their cavalry options. They have only these and the Galathrim Nobles, which means they can only field a total of 3, which puts them in a bit of a hard place if they want to try and counteract cavalry on horseback or be more aggressive and try and charge into infantry. So I think that is a good move, but they are very good, and Imladris have mostly got lancers as well, so it's not the sort of thing that will be easily and cost effectively dealt with by them. Going through the armies a little bit more in detail, simply because it's a 1v1 and these choices could well play out to be very significant indeed. Now moving on to Rules' army and Imladris. Imladris are definitely the elves which benefit most from being more aggressive, which isn't really what I've noticed Rules doing in the past. He prefers a little bit more of an archers and then a phalanx approach to things. We shall see. Here at the front we've got some Gwaith E. Arthand, and this is not the General's Bodyguard unit by the looks of things, or is it? Well, there's Elrond here at the front with his unique model. Is that the General's unit? It's been so long since I've seen Imladris' General that it may very well be. Regardless, this is the sort of unit you will be expecting to see the Imladris General in, of course. Multiple HP spears. I think they still cost 1100. They're going to be very difficult to knock down. It's really going to take some armor piercing to get through them, of course, but they won't do that much damage in return with their spear malice. They are definitely more of a holding unit than they are outright damage. Imladris have options elsewhere for that, though. Some Eldar Quinga here at the front, again, pretty much the equivalent to the Ethel Tirith on the other side. The lighter Elven archers, their lack of armor can really put them in a bad place in a skirmish fight, particularly with some of the other factions which are a little more efficient in that area. But in terms of outright damage, they are very good indeed. Back here we've got another unit of Eldar Quinga, and then we have Rules bringing pikes, which is again what you expect to see from him, to be fair. Imladris sentries are one of the finer pike units in the game. You can only bring 2, but they are very effective at what they do. And if you have them in the centre of your Imladris infantry line, it's very unlikely to be here where you break first. Obviously, they can be skirmished down. There are decent armour values on the Imladris sentries, but the lack of a shield, particularly against Elven factions with their accuracy, may well come back to haunt them, but even so, they will be very good at holding down the front line against those Lothlorien swordsmen and axemen. More archers back here, which again is the sort of thing you expect from Rules. We have some Noratirno warriors, slightly better than the Eldar Quinga in front of them, but that mainly comes in melee, to be honest with you. Their missile damage is only 1 higher, I think, or it might even be the same now. But even so, the Noratirno warriors will offer you basically the same thing. They aren't that cost effective in a skirmish fight against non-Elven factions, but they should do very well here. And then moving out to the side, we have some cavalry. In fact, we have the finest Imladris cavalry, the Gwaith Rockdor. And this is not the General, actually, is it? What is this? This is Elrond again, I think. Or is it? That might be, what's his name? I forget it. I can't remember all of the elves' names. But the Gwaith Rockdor, they are multiple HP lancers, I believe. They are not knights. But this still leaves them as the strongest melee cavalry on the field. They will be able to beat the Lothlorien Mounted Company, provided they get a favourable engagement. And obviously very strong. But we shall see how well they can do. Depends how well Lothlorien can hold down their flanks. Of course, we have some spears ready to move out to the flanks to support as well. The Elder Renway Harry Vital, very strong spearmen, and Lothlorien haven't brought the most spears or polearms in this army, so Lothlorien might actually be the aggressive ones here, which against Imladris you don't often see. Another archer unit, we have the Elder Renway Harry Quinga, and then back here we have the new upgrade model for the Eldar Hetar, which are, of course, previously known as the Linden Longspear, so this is the upgraded variant of them. I think they are now actually useful. It's been a long, long road for them, because I've never really felt they've been any good ever since vanilla, but apparently they are now useful. We shall see in the course of this battle, I suppose. We shall also see if Imladris have any hidden units. That's why I'm glad actually I was on Lothlorien's side. They're much more likely to bring hidden units than anyone else. Now, interestingly enough, here it's definitely going to behoove Kuro to be a little bit more aggressive here, because the skirmish advantage is so heavily in favour of Imladris here, simply because of the amount of archers Rules has brought. He's brought 5 units of them. He's only got 1 unit of cavalry as well. Well, actually, no, he's got 2 units. He's got the Elder Enway Haru Mairu, which I forgot to mention there. Previously, of course, the Elder Enway Lancers. Very, very strong. Basically the equivalent of the Lothlorien Mounted Company in the Imladris roster. But I think the increased armour values of the Haru Mairu means they will do a little bit better. I think actually they have a higher charge even than the Gwathi Roktor as well, which is interesting. So Rules is going to move forward. Not all the way forward, I imagine. I think he's going to be quite content to skirmish. Interesting choice of putting the Gwathi Arthand out here in the front. I suppose he knows that the shield value and the hit points means that the elves aren't really going to want to skirmish with them. And also it prevents the cavalry from simply charging head-on into the archers. You can also see the Galathan riders moving out to the flank. It is interesting. I mean, Kuro can't afford to be all that aggressive either, because if he does move forward, then all of his two-handed axe units are not going to do too well under the hail of arrows that's going to come his way. Elder Enway, Haru Quinga are going to move out to this flank, where the Lothlorien horse archers and cavalry are hovering around. Oh, looks like we do have the skirmish fight underway. Now the Galathan nobles are a very strong skirmish unit. In terms of a single archer, they are the strongest on the field. But I think the sheer amount of Imladris archers is going to hold them in pretty good stead, although they were the ones that moved into range of Lothlorien, so the first volley did go to Lothlorien, which can be all important. We saw how many died in one volley there. What is going on here? Kuro is actually moving his Galathan nobles back a little bit. Maybe to try and get them out of range, because they do have increased range over the basic archers, I believe. Definitely a game of cat and mouse here. This is longer than a normal 1 versus 1 you would expect to be, so I imagine there's going to be a little bit of manoeuvring, a little bit of posturing, and then things will probably happen pretty quickly once it gets into a melee. Elves go about their business pretty fast in melee, for better or for worse. What have we got going on here? The Elder Enway Haru Mairu just pulling back a little bit. Trying to hit them with arrows. Looks like the Elder Enway, the Eldar Quinga, I should say, are going to move forward. This is definitely going to be fully in range. The Lothlorien Mounted Company have taken a few losses. Now this unit of Elder Enway, Eldar Quinga, are in for a pretty rough time in full view of all of the units of Ethel Tirith and the Galathan nobles. An armour value of 3, I believe these guys have, and no shield. Just pulling his cavalry back so it's a little safer. This is the way of the elves. I mean, interestingly enough, Imladris actually are the elves which more than any other can be aggressive, which is why I'm surprised they went so skirmish heavy here. I mean, I know that's how Rules likes to play, but I think Imladris may have been better off trying to be a little bit more aggressive here with more shielded infantry. That might have played into what Kuro wants to do with all of these javelins and all of the armour-piercing infantry that he has brought, but in melee is where Imladris can hold a little bit of an advantage over Lothlorien in many aspects of their army. I think Rules is pretty fortunate here that Kuro didn't decide to bring more archers, because if it comes down to a pure archer fight, Lothlorien are going to be superior to Imladris. And indeed, with those Galathan riders and nobles, it's still going to be pretty difficult for Rules to win in such a way which will allow his infantry to then overwhelm Lothlorien. And I think that's why Kuro is going to be more content to sit back here. If he can keep that armour-piercing infantry, those Lothlorien warriors, out of the archer fire for as long as possible and then move them in later on, then he's going to be in a very good place, because I don't think, unless Rules is going to be able to get those pikes to block the Axemen's advance, I don't think he's going to have the most luck against those Axemen. most of his infantry is highly defensive in nature. He's only got spears and polearms, actually. All of his damage is going to have to come from his cavalry if it comes down to that sort of fight. Meanwhile, Eldar Quinger's still falling away and dying. Let's go over and have a look at these golden boys over here, who so far have taken no losses. Actually, no, they have. They have taken one loss. Interesting. They are firing into the pikemen, I believe, or are they firing into the Noratuno warriors? Nope, they are firing into the pikemen, which is a good choice. Very vulnerable, though the Noratuno warriors are now returning fire, and they are going to get the Eldarenwe Haru Vital to sort of act as a shield wall in front of these pikemen. The classic elven fight. Arrows first and then melee later. Meanwhile, these Galathran riders straying into range of the elven archers. Was that one of the runic soldiers' voices for the Galathran riders there? Meanwhile, Eldarenwe Haru Myru moving forward. Don't want to overextend their archers too much, otherwise this cavalry is likely to come in and charge into the front of these Galathran nobles. Indeed, that is what's going to be happening. Well, the Maetha Ilazgelen are coming forward. And indeed, the cavalry is zoned out efficiently. Galathran riders moving back into range of the Noratuno warriors here. That Eldarenwe Haru Myru moved forward, and they are now being made to pay for it, even though they avoided the javelins. They are not going to avoid the elven arrows. And from the back, I don't think their shield value will even come into it, so they're fully reliant on their admittedly pretty high armour scores. All of the Eldarenwe have armour comparable even to the dwarves in some cases. The Ethel Tirith is still actually in pretty good health. This unit's 88, but that one's still relatively full strength. Overall, I don't think anyone's really picked up all that much of an advantage so far. I'd say Kuro's probably had slightly the better of the opening volleys here, but not by that much. Have a look at the percentage of kills. Yeah, he's killed significantly more, but again, most of this is just the first wave of Rules' archers. He can then just bring up the Noratuno warriors and then the Eldarenwe Haru Quinga. Galathran riders, what are they trying to shoot here? Trying to shoot the Imladra sentries. You can see how brutally accurate the Galathran riders are. Some of those spears are falling over, although the Noratuno warriors are now pointing their bows toward the Galathran riders. Some of them have fallen as well. Very expensive unit. Still the skirmish fight goes on. Eventually something has to give. Eventually Kuro's probably going to run out of ammunition before Rules, simply because he has less archers. And also the Eldarenwe Haru Quinga are moving forward, and with their armour values they are going to be one of the better units in a skirmish fight in this situation. We'll see how well they can do. The Sindar Blade Masters are hiding, however. Don't want to spring that trap too early. Maetha Ilazgalen are being targeted by Rules' archers as well. Really is like a game of cat and mouse. Just can't afford to pull back too far, otherwise you'll leave yourself vulnerable to all the lancers that are present, particularly on the Imladra side. Galathran riders pulling back. This is the sort of game which would infuriate me if I was part of it. I just got no patience. The Eldarenwe Haru Quinga. Arrow thudding into the ground there. The Gwaithi Rock Door could be a pretty important part of the later game here. Multiple HP lancers like this, and they haven't really taken any fire that I've noticed so far. Haru Myro have, but not to the extent that it's going to ruin their impact off a charge. And the Haru Quinga's still firing away, although they have pretty much lost the opening skirmish fights here. But at this point, Kuro is probably not going to want to skirmish with the Eldar Quinga all that much, and indeed he is going for the Eldarenwe Haru Quinga instead. When you kill an archer unit by a certain amount, it's not worth shooting them anymore. And the Eldar Quinga are certainly approaching that threshold, if not already past it, arguably, with how valuable the elven arrows can be. I think these Ethel Tirith are out of ammunition, so Kuro will be quite content to leave them there as an arrow sponge if Rules does not notice that they are out of ammunition. This unit still has some ammo though. Ethel Tirith are actually one of the plainer looking units in the game at the minute. Meanwhile, you can see here the elven range in effect. Still going after these Haru Quinga. Some of them have fallen, not an amount that would prohibit their use later on. What's going on here? This is a fairly bold move. Again, the insurance policy that those Noratuno warriors are offering means that the Lothlorien axemen are unlikely to charge forward and overwhelm the Gwathi Arthan. The Meta Ilazgelen are really the target of the Imladris arrows at the moment, for pretty good reason. If they can deal with them, then the Imladris cavalry should give Imladris the edge moving into the later game. Although if I was Rules, I would be kind of tempted to go for the Lothlorien warriors. They're unshielded. The armor piercing in melee is going to be pretty nasty for him. There's also these staff masters that are hiding. All of the hidden units for Lothlorien might well come into play as well. If Imladris doesn't think they're present and Rules moves in, then the Sindar Blade Masters can wrap around the sides while the Staff Masters help hold down the middle. And indeed, I think Rules is kind of being... He is moving forward a little bit here. I think he's just going to get his Noratuno warriors into range and then keep trying to skirmish down. But the closer the infantry line gets, the more tempting it's going to be for Kuro to charge across the field. So that's going to be less time he's going to spend underneath the arrow fire. Lothlorien Mounted Company out here on the side. Still the arrows fly. Still the Ethel Tirith have some ammo. Do those Lothlorien warriors are just moving out to the flank. The Galathram nobles still have ammo as well. That's high quality ammunition indeed. I think Kuro's probably going to try and go for some of the pikes as they move forward. Or maybe the Eldar Hatar. Or Eldar Etar? That's the hardest unit to pronounce in the Imladris roster. Those are letters that should never be next to one another in such a way. Indeed, those Noratuno warriors taking a real beating from the Galathram nobles. And I don't think Rules has quite got the skirmish advantage to the point that he would have been comfortable with. He still has it, in my opinion. Eventually Lothlorien are going to run out of ammo and then Kuro's going to have to move forward. But having a look at the percentages, he's already 10% down. And in my opinion, his infantry is not going to do too well against the armor piercing. The Lothlorien blades are also pretty good. In fact, I think Rules is going to be the one to make the first move here. Interesting. I mean, at this point, if I was Kuro, I'd be incredibly tempted to charge forward. That was a very concentrated volley there. The Sindar Blade Masters are also out on the flank. Imladris are also in a very narrow formation, which I think they kind of have to be to try and defend their skirmishes, which is still one of their safer bets here. Whereas Lothlorien are a little wider. Lothlorien Mounted Company and Galathram Riders charging forward. And the Lothlorien Mounted Company charging toward the Eldarenwe Harufwinger. The Harumairo do intercept. The Lothlorien Mounted Company, however, they didn't do too well in that engagement. Defeat seems certain, they're shaken. The Gwathi Rokdor are here now. Not the best. Oh, hello. Things have developed. The Lothlorien Blades coming out to the flank. Lothlorien Warriors and the Sindar Blade Masters going around to the rear of the Elven Pikes. This is happening on both sides, with the Ethel Tirith just forming up a front line, so the Pikes have to maintain their current position. The Lothlorien Mounted Company do pull back, so now it's a case of can the Imladris cavalry get round the rear of the Lothlorien lines? If they can, then it could be a bad time for Lothlorien, but the Javelins are still a bit of an insurance policy there. Things have kicked off very quickly here, so let's turn it down to half speed. Now the Gwathi Rokdor are coming forward, and indeed there isn't anything in terms of spears over here to really stop them from charging in. The armor piercing off the Lothlorien warriors might be a little bit of a concern, but I think the Rokdor might just try and go right around the back. We shall see. Over here, this is where Lothlorien pounced initially. Now, these Lothlorien warriors, that defeat does seem certain, but they are up against the finest Imladris infantry that's on the field, the Gwathi Arthan. Over here, on the other hand, the Eldar Hatar also, the victory seems certain. The charges coming in from the Eldarenwe Harumairo could well prove to be pretty nasty here, but the Javelins are flying into them, and the Lothlorien Mounted Company are now back, and the numbers are now much more favourable. The Galathram Riders are still taking a bit of a beating though. What's going on over here? You can see the Eldar Hatar are trying to hold back the Sindar Blade Masters. I can't imagine they will, especially not with the Lothlorien Blade Masters there. The Lothlorien Warriors, I think they're going to try and screen out the Gwathi Rock Door. The Imladris Cavalry is going to be very, very important here. Here on the front line, the Imladris Sentries are going to have it all their own way, really. Attacking them from the front is not going to yield much in the way of results. And you can see that the Athel Tirith are not very good in terms of their melee skills. They're already routing. Maethir Ilazgelen pushing forwards. Lothlorien Mounted Company getting into this Eldar Quinga, trying to finish off these lower unit count units. The Lothlorien Blades moving further into the Imladris positions. They could try and kill these Noraturno warriors, but now the Gwathi Rock Door can run rampant in the back lines. The Lothlorien warriors taking a bit of damage there, but the Rock Door also have to retreat through them. Every axe swing is going to count here, and the Eldar Hetar don't stand a chance against the Sindar Blade Masters in a situation like this. Eldarenwe Harumairo trying to charge into the back of these Lothlorien Blades, but not the finest charge there. They're kind of scraped up against the formation rather than right into the middle of it. These Lothlorien Blades charging forward, they're trying to shut down all of the Elven skirmishers. If they can isolate the pikes, that's where they'll have the most success. You can see over here the Imladris sentries, despite being somewhat surrounded, is still winning over here, although to be fair it is against Stillman Staff Masters. Galathran Riders. There are those Galathran Nobles as well, which in terms of infantry is actually the best Lothlorien has. Noraturno Warriors, victory seems certain. I mean, it's complete chaos here. Everything happening all at once. These Sindar Blade Masters, after being victorious against the initial line of Eldar Hetar, are now going to be moving into the Imladris sentries and Eldarenwe Haru Hetar. There goes the Elven General at the hands of some Lothlorien Blades. That shouldn't make too much of a difference, to be fair. The Elves have got the highest morale overall in the game, so that's not really going to cause much in the way of breaking, I don't think. Well, we are dead even now, so the Imladris Cavalry has equalised the fight considerably. The question is, can they continue to do this? Because Imladris' Cavalry does still need to do a lot of heavy lifting. Their pikes need to hold things down as well. And slowly but surely in this sort of situation, things might turn against them. Let's go back up to 1 speed. Maethir Ilazgelen trying their best to sort of pick away at the Gwathi Rock Door. Lothlorien Mounted Company and the Galathran Riders still firing. Well, the Riders. These Lothlorien Blades. So Lothlorien were largely victorious over on this flank in the rear. But here at the front, Imladris definitely front-loaded their army a little bit more, and they're having a lot more success. We have a look in here. You can see the Eldarenwe Haru Hetar and the Imladris sentries fighting side by side. They're going to easily clean up these Sindar Blade Masters, although the Maethir Ilazgelen are now firing their payloads in here, so that's going to be very bad news for the Imladris front line over there. The Gwathi Arthand are still pretty much in perfect health, to be fair, even in the presence of those AP axes. The Gwathi Rock Door starting to take losses, charging around. They are extremely quick, doing a lot of damage there, but they are also taking pretty much constant range fire from several different sources. Over here, Imladris is still doing pretty well for themselves. That was a decent charge there into the centre of the Lothlorien infantry over here. Imladris are going to win this fight over here. I would say that with the addition of... yeah, you can see how quickly the javelins turn the tide of battle over here. The Eldarenwe just routing off. The sentries almost completely destroyed. And then you have the Lothlorien Blades. I think Lothlorien are going to be okay. As soon as they commit the Galathran Nobles to this fight over here, I think they are going to do quite well for themselves. Haldir is in a bit of a situation though. And the Eldarenwe Haru Quinga is still there. They're still very, very close. But Imladris, I think, is starting to fall behind a little bit again. I mean, the Gwathi Rock Door could still turn this fight around, provided they stay away from the Lazgelen spears. If they continue to get cycle charges in, if they continue to support the Gwathi Arthand and the centre of this pike block over here, but now things are not looking too good over here. The pikes are having to sort of fight back to back, and if the pikes are not in formation, that's always a bit of an ill omen. And now the Gwathi Rock Door could end up surrounded by the Lothlorien warriors and Sindar Blade Masters. Maethir Ilazgelen are out of ammo, I think, are now going to be committed to the front. Decent spears. They won't set the world on fire in melee, but they will still at least contribute. You can see here that there are only 10 of them remaining. What are they throwing their javelins at? The Haru Quinga. Interesting. More Lothlorien Blades coming forward. holding up against the Gwathi Arthan, who have now started to take casualties, but they are holding very firm here in the middle. 7 Imladris sentries, the Gwathi Rockdor charging into the rear of those Maethir Ilasgellan. That might be enough to get them killed. No, they do actually escape. But yeah, those Galathrim nobles are just going to be too strong, I think, at this point for anything Imladris has. All of Imladris' infantry was pretty much defense focused, which in a 1-to-1 fight is not going to put you in the best of places against something like the Galathrim nobles, which are one of the finest skirmisher infantry hybrids there are. They are still trying to cycle charge with their very depleted cavalry units, which may still yield some results, but you know, it's a 3% difference. That's not insurmountable, to be fair, but the Gwathi Arthan are going to have to hold very firm against all of this Lothlorien infantry. And I can't help but feel like as soon as they get surrounded, that's going to be a bad time. The Heruquinga still have ammo though. Sindar Blade Masters were sent out wide to deal with the remnants of this Heruquinga unit, which still had ammunition, and I imagine they'll probably be sent on to distract, if not outright kill, the Heruquinga. Now defeat seems certain for the high tier Imladris spears. Got the staff masters in there. The Galathrim nobles proving too strong for most of what Imladris have left. That's going to be just about all she wrote, I think. If we have a look, it's still a difference of only 3%, but I think that's going to be relatively unchanging. I mean, the cavalry's doing its best, and they will be able to kill individual unit models, but eventually still one Gwathi Rockdor in amongst the staff masters. There's still a few pikes as well, which survived the battering they took from the Maethir Ilasgellan on the other side of the front line. Still 42 Galathrim nobles left alive. There's actually more Gwathi Arthan. But I don't think the spears have the killing power. Those Heruquinga really need to be silenced, and the Sindar Blade Masters are going to be going over there to do that, provided they don't get intercepted by this Heru Myro. Dealing with these banner carriers from the Javelin unit there, and the Gwathi Rockdor. Very close though. Elf versus elf battles do tend to be very close though, because they obviously field less. And the Sindar Blade Masters still just going to be moving into the Eldarenwe Heruquinga, who do actually get a point-blank volley off, which might be enough to tip this fight in favour of the Eldarenwe in melee. But the important thing is they're not firing at the Galathrim nobles, who have cleaned up the last of the Imladris troops over here, and presumably will now go forth and help the Gwathi Arthan, who are actually turning the tables over here. It is going to be very necessary for the Galathrim nobles to get on this front line and help finish them off. Will Imladris actually be able to pull this back? I'd be very impressed, although the percentage gap is widening. This cavalry is still roaming around. Another one of them falls. Heruquinga and Sindar Blade Masters trading relatively evenly with one another. These Imladris spears have definitely held very firm in the middle of all of this chaos.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
I think that was the last Imladris cavalry unit that's on the field, so there's going to be no more cycle charging. I think that Heruquinga's still got ammunition, so it's a very interesting move to... Or have they? They still have their bows out? No, they have their blades. Oh no, they do. They do have ammunition. And he left them? Bold. He's put them in range of these Maethir Ilasgellan, but I think the Sindar Blade Masters are now coming back out to intercept them, but now the Imladris spears, you can see how quickly the tables turned when the Galathrim nobles surrounded them. So victory is going to be Lothlorien's this day. There's no way back for Imladris from this. It could have been for a little while though. If they just had a little bit more cavalry at the end, Imladris could well have won this. Lothlorien Blades still just about alive. The Blades and the Warriors did okay in this fight, but again, the AP, it remains to be seen in the kill counts how well the AP actually did. At the start of the battle I kind of thought it would be a pretty important factor. Maybe it was. balance of forces is evenly matched over there. And now the Gwaith, the Arthand are breaking. It's not a sight you see every day, but with the loss of the general, and I think overall, I'm not sure if army losses are a thing in Medieval 2, to be honest, but considering how surrounded they were, it's understandable why they're running for the hills, and that leaves just this unit of Elder Enway left. Before the battle will be tied up, they're already shaken. And I think they'll end up breaking rather than fighting to the death here, with this tide of Lothlorien troops that's coming towards them. And there they go. Lothlorien victorious. You can see where the battle took place, primarily over here, where Lothlorien wrapped around. Very close in terms of the kill counts as well. Imladris bringing less men to the field, so let's see how well the Lothlorien troops did. The nobles did very well, of course. The riders actually not so well. And again, a lot of their arrows did go into the front of those shielded Elder Enway when the pikes got in formation. And they were a real target for Imladris all game long, which rightly they should have been. Again, you don't expect to see huge numbers here because it's elf versus elf, so that kill count on the Galathan nobles is very significant. Staff masses, again, not the sort of unit you expect to get a lot of kills. They're almost completely defensive in nature. This unit, Sindar Blade Mass, is doing very well for itself, as these Maether Ilazgelen, presumably they're the ones that broke looking at it from Imladris' point of view, the right side of the Imladris line. And the Lothlorien Mounted Company, they charged in very boldly and almost got completely destroyed for it. They did manage to escape, and that did mean they had another tool to sort of try and shut down the Imladris cavalry as the game went on. Lothlorien warriors, 2 units of them. One of them nearly broke 100, the other getting 70, so kind of an average performance from them overall. Yeah, very close. And I think this shows more about Imladris than it does Lothlorien, actually. I think that Imladris are probably the sort of faction which won't favour such a skirmish-heavy approach. I think that the other elves would respond much better to the kind of plan that Rules wanted to commit to. In particular, Linden and Mirkwood will be very good at that sort of layered skirmish approach, because Linden, you can combine that with javelins as well as a lot of pikes, and I'm pretty sure that's what Rules would like to do most of the time, in addition to introducing a hidden ranger that comes in the late game to really wipe away your opponent. Lothlorien are kind of the happy middle ground, I think, between all of the elves. That's kind of how I've viewed them more recently. And I feel as though in that skirmish fight, they were outmatched in terms of a ranged fight in this battle, but not to the extent that Rules would have wanted for Imladris to have the win here, because he needed to do more damage to Lothlorien's infantry in order to win that fight. Because all of his infantry was not really designed around doing damage, it was designed around holding the enemy in place, I think. But yeah, I mean, Imladris, I think, would have been much better off going for some of their more aggressive infantry, or at least some of their sworded infantry. Something like the Imladris Guardians would have been pretty good to see in this situation. Maybe just a completely shielded army to try and swamp Lothlorien in addition to the cavalry. A rush army for the elves is much more viable with Imladris than it is with the others. But still, very, very close indeed. Good to have just a 1v1 on grassy plain is much more... You talk a lot more about the factions and about the tactics. It's a very pure example of a battle. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next, which will likely be another faction showcase.